Okay, we're gonna go for it. I'm gonna do my July wrap up in September, and hopefully that I remember most of these books. Hello and welcome, I'm Kira the Scrivener, and I didn't do that so far. So I read 30 books in July. First we have 2 stars, and this was Wicked Saints. I was just not very impressed with this book. I just think it lacked in a lot of areas. I think that Emily Duncan can improve as an author, but in overall, as her first novel, I think that it just was not a book that really captured my attention or love at all, and just in elements it was just like, this is slightly confusing. It's a girl who can talk to gods and becomes slightly disillusioned. Then I read my first physical book, and this was 4 stars, and this was Little Leaders. This is a nonfiction book that just looks at women throughout African American history and their role and importance, and I think this was really informative, and I really enjoyed finding out these people. I really would have appreciated it more if it had more in-depth things, because they only had 1 page and then an illustration, but I think it's generally more aimed for children, so I think it's a good way to help women of all races and things, and even different genders and stuff, to really see powerful women. I think that's a really important aspect. 4 stars, and this is a reread and a physical book, and I own it. And this is Yellow Wallpaper. This is a book that I really appreciated. I said especially appreciated more on the second reread, and this is just one of the just first most powerful books looking at mental health, and it's published in the 1890s. It does not really react well to being told to lay in bed and not do anything, and that will cure her mental health. And then for 3 stars, we have Ruin of Kings, and this is a high fantasy adult novel, and it has a very confusing narrative style. So pretty much we have a first-person narration and a third-person narration about the same people at different stages being told by different human beings, and they're in a jail cell. And I was immediately, the first few scenes just really enamored me. I really liked the storytelling. I think that it was overly convoluted for no sense other than like, I am so great and a magical writer kind of thing, not to show shade, but I'm more appreciative of the second book that I'm assuming will not have that because they met later on in the series. Overall, I think that it was a mediocre story. I gave it 3 stars, so I thought it was quite good. I thought that the story well was developed. It was overly landy, it's a thick book, but I did really appreciate it, and the world, and I feel like I would have to reread it in order to understand everything that happened. I don't know if I want to reread it, that's part of the thing. But I am excited to read the second book and really see how much I'm going to love this series or not love this series. I feel like it's going to be one of those grand series that goes on forever and ever. Reread of Stardust. I upped this to 5 stars when I read it. I just really appreciate the story. I think that it's amazing. The first time I read it physical, the second time I read it auditory, and I just really appreciate the story. I think it's very magical. I think it's very tragic and beautiful, and I really like that aspect. And overall, I just really, really adored this novel. And then I have my middle grade books, which is The Runaway King, and I also read The Shadow Throne, which is the 3rd book, but I don't own it. And I really appreciate the story. The first one I think could have been as good as a standalone, or I just didn't like the second and third one as better. I think that the first one really was a lot of action and a lot of political intrigue and stuff like that. And Jennifer Nielsen just didn't want to super go back to not having the action. So she made convoluted reasons for it to be in action and just did not need to have action in the second and third books as much as it did. And I think that really took away from the plot. But generally, I think that the story is compelling, and I feel like it's a very fresh air for a middle grade, kind of on the edge of YA. And then I gave 2 stars to The Dragon Pearl, and this is a book by Yoon-Ha Lee, and it is set in the Rick Riordan Presents beautifulness, and this is science fiction futuristic Korea inspired, or just Korea itself. I'm not really sure. I really thought the world building was cool, but I wish I had gotten it more. It has some non-binary rep, as I think because the character is a kitsune, or what is the other name for kitsune? But they can choose their gender, and a lot of the time, and shapeshift, and the character goes in between different genders. And even though it's not clearly non-binary, I think that it would be something that is very representative for people in that community as well. I thought that the story itself wasn't the grandest. I think that it missed some elements, even though the world and the thought of it was quite good. This is 3 stars, and this is Amazing Fantasy 15, and this is the first appearance of SpiderMan, and it also had some other stories in it that were okay. I think that I really appreciated the first time that SpiderMan appeared in his first way, and just the first novel, or the first 15 pages that tells the story is just so evocative and amazing and incredible, and I really just appreciated that. I think that Stan Lee and Steve Ditko did such an incredible job of illustrating and telling the story, and the end line is, with great power there must be great responsibility, which even has more compounding power. And I picked this up because NerdSync did something about this, and I felt compelled to read it. And now I'm reading through like the whole first year of SpiderMan, so this started something. Stars to middle grade. I really love this book. I really enjoy Sheenan McGuire's books. I think that she's a magical storyteller and just very evocative and amazing. I really gets into those minds. I think the plot was incredible. I think the characters were really well done, and just the writing style and the narrative and everything about it was really what got me. I really love when it carries throughout people's whole lives and tells their stories so evocatively, and you get to meet them at different points and you see them develop in realistic ways, even if you only touch on them for a few chapters at that age. And I think that that was really well done. And then we gave 3 stars to Critic throughout the ages. This is, you know, in the wider wizardly world, and I think that it was fun and entertaining, and it gave you some history, and it gave you the match in the future, and I thought that those were just well constructed, and for what it was really good. And then we have Aurora Rising. Gave this 2 stars. This is by Jake Kristoff and Amy Kaufman, and I was largely disappointed by this. I thought that certain aspects of it were quite good. I liked some characters. I thought that the world was interesting, and I'm intrigued to read more, but it definitely wasn't a book that met the record that I wanted to read. It wasn't a book that wowed me. Every Heart a Doorway and Down Among the Sticks and Bones. I read a lot of Sheenan McGuire today. And this too, I really appreciated. I gave 2 stars to Every Heart a Doorway and 3 stars to Down Among the Sticks and Bones. I really like Every Heart a Doorway. I like that it introduced the world, and I think that the murder plot is kind of not needed, but I did like it better the second way around. I think the asexual representation was slightly problematic, as it's clearly a person that is not ace aro, and yet it is represented that way, and I think that there could be better representation for that. For Down Among the Sticks and Bones, I really appreciated it. I think I again loved it again the first time, but I think that I picked up on a lot more, and I really appreciated reading this back to back with Every Heart a Doorway, because it gave me a more remembrance into who they are as characters, because it was quite spread out between the first 2, and I really appreciate the world and the development, and I know that we will touch on them again coming forward too, so I'm really appreciating that, and I'm really jazzed for it. I think that she tells very evocative stories that are well written. I really especially love her writing style. I think that her writing style and the way that she tells stories is quite good. 3 stars to Ironhearted Violet, and this is by Kelly Barnhill. I really just love Kelly Barnhill as a writer now. I again really love her narrative style. I think that she writes middle grade novels for all ages very well, and I think that that is just a beautiful way of telling story and meeting kids where they are. And this tells a story about a princess that wishes to be something other than who she is, and it really just explores many aspects. And it's a book that I kind of want to reread, because I don't think that I got its fullness out of the first time, but I think that it was very well constructed and dealt with some like darker themes and beautifulness, and I just adored it. What else can I say? We have Other Words for Home, and this was a physical read that was 5 stars and blew my freaking mind. It is about a Syrian girl named Jude, and it is written in verse, and it's about her story in Syria and then moving to the US, and it is such a beautiful novel. I cannot tell you the words. I need to film a review about it. Hit me over the head because I haven't done it yet. It is beautiful. It tells the story of growing up and identity and religion and race and racism and Islamophobia and all of those things, and what it means in such powerful, short, concise, beautiful writing. I just highly recommend it. I think it's a book that everyone should read, whatever your background is, because I think that it gives a lot of emotion into what it means to be a girl growing up in a Muslim community, what it means to be a refugee, all of these things that are such important topics and very poignant topics at this time. Crystal Ribbon, this is by Celeste Lim, and she wrote this for her grad school project, and I loved it. It tells a story, and it's inspired in ancient Chinese world, and it's much darker. It's about this girl who was sold into being a wife at the age of like 11, but she's the wife to like a 3-year-old, so she's also his caretaker, and it's a very interesting story, and it's a lot about poverty and family dynamics and all of these things, and it's very touching, very dark for middle grade, and I really enjoyed the exploration of those things, and I think that she's very underrated. And then we have 2 Grace Lin books, and this is When the Sea Turns Silver and Where the Mountains Meet the Moon, and they're middle grade fantasy also inspired by ancient Chinese. And I read them too close together to really differentiate them, but just such beautiful weaving and storytellings, and this is very familiar with the Crystal Ribbon as well. Just beautiful, inspired of ancient history and lore, and seamlessly mixing all of them. I think that I do want to reread all three of them, probably more spread out, so that they're not all so collected in my brain, but just heavily beautiful stories that are, I think could be very imaginative and fairy tale-esque for children. This was really good. And Kara, you did, I talked to Kara and Voxer, and there was like that loud noise that totally terrified me. Okay, I'm talking about middle grade magic, so this is very adequate that she did that now. Okay, getting back into the thing. And for 3 stars, I had Arusha and the End of Time. This is by Roshni Chokshi, and it is the second book in the Pandava quartet, and I really appreciated it more than the first one, I mean. I thought that it had a more balance of things. I think that the first one relied too much on humor that just was not all ages, and I think it was just much more immature than most middle grade I have, and I just really appreciated the book more. I think that the addition of 2 characters was really good. Really appreciated the story. I think that it was more well developed, and it did a lot of family and the idea of love, and love in family, and love for yourself, and identity, and divorce, and dealing with broken families, and I think that it was just really beautiful and amazing, and it had a lot more humor that I just enjoyed, and I can't wait to read the 3rd one. 1 star, The Girl in the Tower. Shouldn't be surprised. I'm sorry, Katharina Dean. I'm already excited to read more of her books. I think I will finish the series just because I'm determined, even though I'm not invested at all. I don't know why, I still want to finish the books. But yeah, I think that this is a story, the second sequel to, it's the first sequel, second book to The Bear and the Nightingale, and what can I say? It's just not my book. I think that it's a lot of every aspect, whether political intrigue, story, Russian fairy tales, all of these elements that I just really love, character driven, and yet I just do not feel a connection, and I don't understand why. It's like this nightmarish thing that I just feel so like not interested, not involved, not anything, despite the fact that I should, by all accounts, really, really like the story, and I don't know why. But I'm determined to find out. We have 3 stars, and this is The House of Hades. This is a middle grade book. That is the 4th book in the Heroes of Olympus, the 2nd series of Percy Jackson, and I did really like this one more than I figured. I gave it 3 stars. I think that there was cool aspects. I really liked the times in redacted dark places. I think that there's development and darkness, and I think that the point on memory and the issues of Flawed and Nico shines through. My love. And I just really liked the fact that consequences come back, and more of the fact that our actions impact things. Coraline, and I gave this 2 stars. I think the world building was cool in this. I really enjoyed her story and her inner dialogue and different aspects. Again, it wasn't a story that overly wowed me, but I did really appreciate it for what it was. And then I have 3 stars to Deadly Class. I really enjoyed the conversation around mental health, the conversation around just identity and stuff. It looks at a school of assassins, but it starts with a guy living on the streets after after mental health was cut. His family had tragedy, and he was left on the street, and it has a vendetta against him and the president at the time, which was Reagan, and it's very interesting exploration of this and morality and how different people in different situations would act, and our morality and all of that, and I just really appreciate it, and I can't wait to read more. And then I read 2 stars to Shawshank Redemption. I generally was not interested through the majority of it. I thought that the end was very interesting, and I think I would reread the end and kind of like figure it out and think about the world. And then I had 4 stars to Reaper at the Gates. This is by Sabbath Tahir. I have an entire vlog, just mostly me yelling about how much I loved it and enjoyed it in the aspects, and I think that the world development and everything like that was incredibly good. It had some reveals that just blew my freaking mind, and I really just appreciated how much the characters have changed in 3 books. Like, you look at who they were at the genesis of the series, and that's just like, wow, this is so different and beautiful and wonderful, and I think that's what you really want. I don't think I can say that much else without spoiling content, so I won't. And then I have 3 stars to The Astonishing Color of After. This book really surprised me. I didn't love it at first, and I think the magical realism aspects were just very interesting and beautiful, and I think that representation of mental health was good, and identity of being half white and half Taiwanese. as she's convinced that her mother is a bird after she commits suicide. Definitely heavy trigger warnings. And I think that the exploration of family and identity and all of those things were beautiful, and at the end it just made me cry a lot. And I was just like weeping, and I needed to go on a road trip, and I just delayed the road trip because I needed to sit there and listen to it and just mesh it all into my soul. And I just heavily appreciated it. It was beautiful work, and really made me think about what it was like to have someone who lives with mental illness. As someone who deals with mental illness myself, that was very emotional to be like, this is how hard it can be on people around. We have The Wicked King. I gave this 4 stars, and I have to apologize to Holly Black. I just did not necessarily have the greatest opinion of her books. Like, I just thought that they were slightly, trashy. And then I read the Crow Brandt, and I was surprised by a lot of the nuance and the story building and the characters in this, and I really appreciated the second book even more. It has some great reveals that I just adored and loved and amazed. I can't wait for Queen of Nothing. I'm glad that it's coming out in like 2 months. Yeah, it was just a really extraordinary book that really dove into a lot of themes and development and led you in an incredible journey. And maybe it's not the finest literature ever, but I'm happy. And then we have 1 star. Do I have a 0? Oh no, that's an owned. For Tellin by Julia Collega. This wasn't necessarily the worst book ever. I just think it had really problematic issues in regards to the females and the characters, the girl hate, the representation, just a lot of the elements. I'm trying to keep it from my mind. I'll do a review. I always say I'm going to do reviews, but I'll try to do a review to fully explain a lot of my problematic issues with this. I was listening to it on a road trip, and I was mostly just going, like, sometimes I would just laugh out loud at the things that were saying. Oh, also the fact that it felt very much like a contemporary, just with dragons. Like, she's supposed to be a dragon, but, like, other than her being a dragon, could have been, like, subbed in for something else, like this big secret, and it would have played out exactly the same. It was so cliched, and if it wasn't a 2015 release, I probably would have had a much more, like, okay, that's fine, but, like, it's not her first novel. It was set in 2050, not, like, 2010, and, like, man, oh man. Yeah, and those were my books for that. That was a lot of talking. Happy reading and writing. You can find my thoughts always on my Instagram, my Twitter, and my Goodreads will always have reviews up, so I look forward to seeing you there, and happy reading and writing, and I will see you